There, sound should work now. Oh boy, we're live. We're here. It's real. So, I guess the first thing is waiting for some people to show up. Oh boy. It's been such a long time since I've done this. I barely even remember how. So, this might be awkward, and I guess that's okay. Welcome. There's a book. It's weird. Fun thing, and I'm probably going to bring this up again if more people show up. I don't actually have the book. I don't have my own copy yet. I've been checking my mail and I don't have it, which is really funny because friends of mine have written me and sent me pictures of their copy having arrived today. And the only thing I could say was like, yay, you have the book before I do, because I don't have it. So I really only have my memory of it. And so the name of the book is What Your Autistic Child Wants You to Know. And it is a republication of my first book, which was What Your Child with Asperger's Wants You to Know. And basically, what happened was I was approached by a publisher, Jessica Kingsley Publishing, about a different book. And I was sassy enough, I guess, to ask, I have this other book. Do you want to take a look at it? And they did, and they liked it. And then they wanted, obviously a bunch of new chapters. So I've written, I know that I've written 13 new sections that were significant. Not all of them were chapters. Some of them were like additions to chapters. Some of them was a part of a chapter that was made into a new chapter and built out to bring more information into it. But there's a bunch of new chapters. It's been restructured to make it more readable, and to make it easier to follow in terms of when each topic is brought up. Before it was just alphabetical order, which is also a system that you can have, and that's what I chose back then. But I actually really like the new structure of the book. So yeah, there's a new structure, but overall it's the same book, but built out, new information, new chapters, and it's been given a pretty good overhaul, I would say, which it needed, honestly. I don't know why, because when you release a book, you're like, okay, it's done, it's fine, I can let it go now. And then, a few years later, and this was released in, was it 2015 or 2016? This book was released originally, and I thought it's going to be fine. But then when I did have a new look at it for this republication, it was already so outdated, and yeah, so it needed the overhaul, and it's been given that. And there were some new autistic beta readers on it as well, which I really, really appreciate. Those people definitely contributed a lot to the new content. And I'm so grateful for what they did in stepping up. So yeah, that's really the information. And I guess I'm going to probably repeat a bit of this. Maybe if we're here for a long time, we'll see. But yeah, that's the book, and you can get it anywhere that you buy books online. I can't make promises about physical bookshops, obviously, because they're kind of their own company and they sell the books they want to sell. But anywhere online that you get books, you should be able to get this one. And if you are in the UK, it may be relevant to know that there is a discount code. So if you go to jkp.co.uk and you find my book there, you should be able to use the code MAJA20, so MAJA20, and that code should get you 20% off. It might not be relevant if you are outside of the UK because of Brexit. So if you're in Europe, this would have been really useful before Brexit, and now it's kind of, yeah, so now there's taxes and import fees and all kinds of stuff that there didn't used to be when you bought stuff from the UK, which is a bummer, honestly. Yeah. So I'm here, and I don't even really know what to talk about because it's a book, and it's about autism. It's about really what I would have wanted my parents to know, and what I want most parents to know. Parents with autistic children. And that's kind of the essence of the book. I don't know, maybe I can talk about what the original intention was. Why I wrote this book. That might be a good topic, right? Okay. Basically, when I started in autism education, when I did presentations and such, I would very often encounter parents who had autistic children and who had a whole bunch of questions and obviously wanted to understand their child better. And I would very often refer them to literature, which their response to that would always be like, yeah, those books are huge tomes and we're never going to get through them. We're just never, ever going to get through them. It's too much. It's overwhelming, right? And I thought, okay, well, if the books that are out there are too overwhelming because they're too long, the chapters are too long, or the language is too academic, kind of, then what's needed is a book with really short chapters and that is approachable so that parents don't have to find somewhere half an hour or an hour to sit down and read, because parents don't have that time. They have an autistic child. They are overwhelmed generally. And basically, if you have any child, you're probably a little bit overwhelmed. And so finding that time to sit down and read is just not going to happen. So I figured, okay, I'll make the chapters as short as possible. And that's basically the foundation of the idea for this book was, can I take all of this information about autism and make it short and approachable and easy to read? And so I hope I've done that. And the feedback from the first edition of the book has been really good, not just from parents, but also from other autistic people, and I really, really appreciate all of the autistic people that reach out and say, "This is me. You've described us really well, and thank you." That is the wildest thing to me, that there are people out there who feel like I've done a good job in representing us and what we wanted our parents to know, and thank you. Ah, so the feedback has been really good, and I hope that this republication with the new chapters and with the overhaul that it's gone through, I hope that that does really well as well. I hope that the new information is as good as the old. So hi, welcome. It's a small crowd, but we like that. We like being able to chat. Just a few people, just us. How many people are like old YouTube subscribers? Are there any of you here? Well, Rubber Wilbur, I remember you. T-Man, I feel like I've seen your name before, but I'm not sure. Hi. I'm so glad to see you. I've been on here for a really long time, and I've been so inactive for most of that time. Oh, wow. Cool. So we're just a bunch of old subscribers hanging out with me. That is so awesome. Oh my gosh. Hi. Oh, awesome. I actually just went through some of my old videos. I know that when I finished my psychology degree, I made a lot of old videos private, because I was so worried, kind of, that people would see my old videos and think that that represented my academic and professional knowledge, and obviously it didn't. It represented my personal experience. And what I've just done is gone through the ones I know that I liked those videos, and they helped people, and people have been requesting for them to come back. And so I've just gone through and added a little note in the description to say that, this is an old video from before I was a psychologist. So just keep that in mind. And I hope that that's going to be sufficient, because those old videos really did do something, and they were, useful to people, or so they told me. Oh, wow. That's so cool. Old videos. T-Man, you said I look like I'm doing well. Yes. It's been a wild ride, honestly, since I started university. It's been a marathon. It's been really enjoyable, and I've learned so much, and I'm so thankful that I'm able to work with autistic people and with parents of autistic people, and that I'm able to do autism education more professionally now. I'm still working part-time. But yeah, it's been a marathon. University it's so funny, because I have spoken to other autistic psychologists and doctors and academics in general, and they tell me that university really used to be like a haven for autistic people, where we could go and just really nerd out. And now Obviously, I don't know what it's like in other countries. I don't know other universities, but from what I hear, it's a general tendency. Universities become a lot more um, allistic, non-autistic based, and like Copenhagen University was definitely a lot of group work and a lot of set curriculums that really didn't have a lot of wiggle room. So there wasn't that ability to really chase your interests until like the bachelor's thesis or the master's thesis. And so those were the two times during university that I could actually nerd out. And I did, obviously. But it's been a lot. And that's actually a part of why I've been so inactive. One is that there does tend to be this kind of fatigue with coming up with new things to post about, and also not wanting to get caught up in the dramas that arise. And I feel that sometimes in social media things kind of get more dramatic than they need to be. Um, and so that's turned me off a little bit sometimes. But for the most part, it's really just been that I've been overwhelmed and just been trying to run this marathon. And uh, now I'm a psychologist. I work with it every day, and I don't know, coming home and doing more of it. I want to reach more people, but I also need to have the energy to do it. And yeah, basically what happened was I finished my degree and I spent the next 2 months reworking this book for the republication. Um, oh boy, that was like a year and a half ago. That tells you how long this takes. And then I basically started working right away. And oof, I should have taken a break. Y'all, I should have taken a break. I didn't. If any of you are in university or are in the process of taking a longer education, definitely when you finish, if you have the opportunity, take a little break, just a little break when you're done. Um, so yeah, I find people prefer the personal flaws of a person who isn't trying to impersonal through professionalism. That might be true. And I'm never going to be not me. I'm never going to be just a psychologist and just an educator. I'm still me. I'm still also an autistic person, and I'm an autistic person first. The psychology degree kind of is an addendum, I guess. But it does also put me in a position where I do have a responsibility with how I phrase things. So some of my old videos, uh, I'm really stating some personal opinions, and I don't know that I was clear enough back then that those were my personal opinions. Maybe I was, but certainly now I would have to be a little more clear in my communication when it's like, this is research based, this is my personal opinion, yada yada. Oh yes. Okay, so I found whenever I went to shrinks who used their professionalism as a wall when I was trying to connect with them made me angry. I agree, and I actually see that a lot. And I find that people who come to me as clients, they find it a relief that I'm an autistic person as well, and that I do talk openly about not just my knowledge as a psychologist, but also my experience as an autistic person. And I'm not separating the two. They're both me. And honestly, the psychology knowledge that I have, the professional knowledge that I have, all it does is it gives me a foundation for what does the research say, but it doesn't actually change what I would do. It doesn't change the advice that I give. I find that it's much more so my experience that gives me more different ways of approaching a problem to choose from. So, yeah, I definitely find, and I see this a lot with psychiatrists. I don't know, that's just my personal experience is when I've spoken to psychiatrists, they tend to have more of that wall. And psychologists that I've spoken to have been perhaps 60 to 70% more human than professional wall. And yeah, it's definitely the ones that don't have that wall that actually help you. It's the ones that really use their humanity, I guess. Um, the ones who aren't afraid to be a person in that room, those are the ones that help, in my experience. Um, on the other hand, I have heard of some people that go to a psychologist, and so this hasn't been my personal experience, but colleagues have told me about this. So there are some people who go to a psychologist and they're like, give me the answers. And it's like, I can't just give you the answers. If there were clear-cut answers for every problem, we wouldn't need psychologists. We wouldn't need the conversation that goes on in the room. Because then we could just, write a book or publish a website, and then you could find the answers on there. It's the conversation. It's the exploration of who are you, what do you need, what are the solutions that work for you. That's what, um, yeah, that's what makes the difference, I think. You identify with the person. Have you ever considered that might be the wrong perspective? Um, I don't. I think what I do is more I'm a person in that room, and the person I'm talking to is also a person. And the professional knowledge is there, and I use it as a tool, but it's not me. And if I put on that hat that I'm a professional, then I'm not as helpful, because we have to be people that are connecting first. And a part of that is being real about who I am as well. So it's funny because in in university there was so many times the point that you should really be careful as a psychologist about how much you're sharing with the people you're talking to, as a psychologist. And I'm like, yeah, of course, if you're sharing like really seriously private stuff, then there does need to be a boundary. You're not just a pair of friends talking. You're there to make a difference. But on the other hand, it would be weird of me if I'm open about being an autistic psychologist, but I'm not open about my experiences as an autistic person. That would be weird. That would be a weird separation, kind of. How are we doing today? I'm doing good. How are you? How are you? I hope everybody is good, and I hope you're all happy in your lives. And yeah, doing self-reflection and growing as people. That's the most awesome journey to be on. Going back to what you mentioned about your university, did you find that it was possible to get accommodations for less group work because of my diagnosis? Actually, no. So overall, sometimes there are choices where you can choose to work alone or you can choose to be in a group. Sometimes it would just be, this project has to be done in a group of X amount of people. And there would be no way around that. And I would just have to get through it somehow. What I found was where there was the most leeway with accommodating my diagnosis was actually when I was talking to each single professor or instructor. And I would just tell them, look, I'm autistic. Some days I'm fine with group work. Some days I have the energy for it. And some days I don't. Can we agree that I will give a signal kind of when I'm having an off day and I'm not ready to do group work? And then I could get out of like the small bits of group work that were more kind of discuss this problem in groups or talk to the person next to you for 5 minutes about this topic, and then we'll catch up. Like, I could get out of that, but it would be on the basis of talking to each professor or instructor. It would not be a proper, like, hey, I have a diagnosis, can I get out of group work, period. So it was very much, yeah. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I see there's people here from the UK, and there's people here with what looks to be Korean names, and there are some people that I think are possibly from either Germany or Holland. This is, for such a small group of people, this is very international. I'm so glad that, oh, Japanese. I'm sorry. I was mistaking some signs. Sorry. And Sweden. Okay, cool. Finland. Wow. Okay, let's see. So Dennis, you posted kind of two questions. Let me just read. Would it be weird if it might benefit the conversation with the person you're talking to? What I'm saying is that if you have a client that struggles with autism, couldn't it be beneficial if you could relate to the topic? I find that it is. I find that it is very much, hey, US and Wales. Wow. Very international. Hey. Okay. So yes, I find that it does help that I can relate to people's autism. I also find that even the ones where our profiles are very different and we don't necessarily relate to the specific things about each other, um, it still helps that I'm autistic too, because there's a barrier that is immediately removed. So I talk to a lot of people, especially teenagers, who are used to just being put in a room with some professional, and then they have to open up and talk about themselves. And that is a really annoying position to be put in as a teenager. Like, why do I have to talk to this stranger, right? And what happens when they come to me, I find, is that there's a there's kind of an immediate trust, because I just go, I'm autistic too. And I've been where you are. I've been put in that room to talk to that stranger, and been like, I feel like I have to open up somehow to this person, and it took me 6 months every time I met a new psychologist to trust them. And so when I tell that to autistic teenagers, it doesn't even really matter if we have the same sort of profile. What matters is I've been where they are. I've been in that position. I relate, and I understand if they don't want to talk to me. I really seriously do, because I didn't want to talk to those people either. But if you do want to talk to me, then we can do that. And I'm going to do my best to help. And I find that that brings down the barriers. I find that, and it builds trust very quickly. And so I find that I'm actually able to work very quickly with teenagers who their parents tell me that other psychologists have not been able to get through to them. And I think that's because some professionals really have too much of a distance in the room. Like, there's too much of that professional hat going on, and not really relating as a human to the person you're sitting with. So, yeah. Congratulations on your book. I've been watching you for 10 years now, and I'm so proud of you. Your videos really helped me back then, a confused teen who couldn't accept myself. Oh, wow. Thank you. I'm so glad to hear that my videos made a difference to you back then. And I hope so much that I'm able to make a difference in the future as well, for you and for other people. It makes the marathon and the struggles and the drama and everything, it makes it worth it to know that there are people out there that got anything out of it, honestly. So thank you for that comment. Your videos helped me to get diagnosed. Wow. Oh, that is really cool. Congratulations on your diagnosis. As someone with ASD, I've had problems with executive functioning. 2 months ago, I saw a YouTube video about doing a daily bullet journal to manage time, and it's changed my life. I value time more, definitely. Honestly, I find bullet journals really helpful. And I find that when we have executive function differences from, the normal population, honestly, I think there are more of us than we think. The numbers just keep growing. I find that structuring your time, structuring your thoughts and your prioritizations helps a lot. I would say, though, as well, that the overlap between autism and ADD/ADHD is so huge that if you are someone who has an autism diagnosis and you've not been screened for an attention disorder, if it's possible for you to get that screening, get it. You might qualify for an ADD or an ADHD diagnosis. And if you do, that medication can possibly change your life. It doesn't for everyone. It doesn't work for everyone. Some people just feel no difference at all, and you know, they find ways to manage their lives with other strategies. And medication definitely shouldn't stand alone, but it can really help. I was not diagnosed with ADD until I was 33. And wow, I went through most of my university education without medication, and the difference that it made in the end was huge. Not an understatement. Medication, if you have undiagnosed ADD or ADHD, it can definitely make a huge difference. So if it's possible, get that screening. It did take me like months of figuring out which specific drug and which brand and which dosage. So there's a whole thing there, and only go through it if you have the energy to go through it. But it's definitely something that can be worth doing. Putting a person with ADHD with 357 questions is not a good idea. It took me hours to complete. Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, it can be really difficult. And honestly, sometimes what we will do where I work is we will go through questionnaires with the person there to keep a pace that the person can deal with and talk about each question, because sometimes the questions in these screenings are phrased so poorly, and it can actually be really helpful to go through that. And sometimes it takes a few sessions, but that's okay. We get through it, and if it's helpful to that person, then it's worth doing. And definitely if there's yeah. If there is an attention disorder there, oh boy, it can be so difficult to deal with all of those questions. Yeah. Thank you. Been diagnosed 7 years now. I was 25. Wow. Okay, cool. So I hope that being diagnosed has made a difference for you, and that it's helped you to figure out what you need in your daily life to make it better. I hear from a lot of people when they get diagnosed as adults that it's hugely helpful, and that it's like finding out, oh wait, I've been trying to live in a way that's just not conducive to my well-being at all, and now I can figure out what's good for me. And obviously I was diagnosed when I was 16, so I had some of my teen years still to figure all that out, and to probably distance myself a little bit more from the norm. So I was lucky in that respect, but I definitely hear from people who were diagnosed as adults and who went through that process, you know, on their own account, that it's huge to get that clarification and to get that validation as well. Have you heard of the tragedy of Chris Chan, the most documented? No. I mean, it's possible that I have, but there's a lot of things I don't hear about. I find news very depressing, and I find social media very depressing. And so um, I take my news in bite-sized chunks whenever I have the energy to cope, basically. Um, I spend more time on going in depth with issues that I find particularly interesting or particularly important, and talking to the people in my life about those things. Um, I find that rewarding, and I find it less stressful generally. Um, oh, what is the percentage overlap exactly? I don't know exactly, and I think we might possibly see it grow. Um, I think so. Okay, what I actually did one day, I was with a colleague of mine who's also an autistic psychologist here in Denmark, and we tried doing a Venn diagram of autism and ADHD. And there were so many things on that Venn diagram that, like, so you draw two circles that are overlapping, and then you try to place the symptoms, right, in each part. So in either or in the overlapping circle. And there were so many things that even if we were placing them in the either or circles, it would be like there's more of this than in the other diagnosis, but it's still relevant. So when we were trying to make this Venn diagram, it was like, here we are, two psychologists, two autistic psychologists who specialize in these fields, and we are not able to fully um, we're not able to fully conceptualize things that are only autism or only ADD, ADHD. There were a few things, but most of it was just, it's either, yep, this is relevant for both, or there's more of it here, there's more of it here, but it's kind of, it's both. I think if you went into like research, I there's probably data on it, and there's probably, if you were talking to a psychiatrist, they would be much more stringent in the differences between autism and ADD, ADHD. Um, or if you were talking to someone who works in psychiatry, because they tend to go by, you know, just the diagnostic criteria. That's their job. And that's fine. I'm not criticizing that approach. It's just that's their job. And that's not my job. My job is to work with these people to figure out what are their symptoms, what can we find out, what strategies do they need to help them in their daily life. And when I qualitatively look at people who are diagnosed with either an autism spectrum disorder um, or an ADD, ADHD diagnosis, the overlapping symptoms and challenges in daily life, it's so similar. And this is why, if you go on autistic Twitter or on ADHD Twitter, um, you will find so many similarities. Like, even if you're only diagnosed with autism, you will find, or even if you only identify as autistic, you will find on ADHD Twitter, there are so many things you will relate to. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy, and vice versa. So, yeah. Um, don't let a condition define you, but let it excel you. Exactly. Yes. So a diagnosis is a tool. It is something that we use to help on the journey of what works for this person, what solutions, what strategies will possibly work for this person. It's a tool. That's all it is. And sometimes it's a tool to get access to support. And sometimes it's a tool to help you in your journey of um, discovering yourself and, reading online and finding sources there. Either is fine. Um, it is very difficult to get screenings, and especially depending on where you live. Um, I would say almost anywhere you live, even in Denmark, which we have a very strong public health care system, even in psychiatry, compared to many other countries. It's still not good. So the access to get a diagnosis is so very often based on either your suffering being so extreme that there's no other place for you to go. This that like psychiatry has to take you in, or you have the money to basically go private. And it's depressing to me that even in a country like mine where we do fund these things, there is publicly available healthcare, both in terms of like medical issues um, and psychiatry, but access is just, yeah. Um, okay, let's see. Oh, okay. How is it in Denmark? Are the healthcare system just and when it comes to people struggling with addiction? So in Denmark, there's this thing in psychiatry where apparently it's a rule that if you have a substance addiction and a psychiatric diagnosis, you can only be treated in like special centers that specialize in both, and the access to that is almost not possible. Very often, what they will say is we have to treat the addiction before we can treat the psychiatric diagnosis. So even before you can get help with if you're struggling with depression, well, we have to treat the addiction first. And it makes no sense to me because like there's a reason people are addicted to things, and usually it's because they're suffering. And if we don't address the suffering, how can we address the addiction? And the amount of people, it really is a double-edged sword. Someone told me at one point, and I haven't read this myself, so don't crucify me if I'm wrong. Someone, a colleague of mine, a really, really good, knowledgeable, and amazing colleague of mine, told me at one point that there was one substance addiction treatment center where they had done or was it one? There was a study. They screened everyone there for autism. Just everyone that had, I think it was like an alcohol addiction center, and they just screened everyone for autism. Um, I don't remember if anyone was already diagnosed, but it was like 25% that were undiagnosed with autism that also had, this substance addiction. And it's like, okay, well, how do we address the suffering that comes from being undiagnosed and autistic? How do we address the suffering that comes from that, and that comes from trying to live as an holistic person, as a non-autistic person, when you are in fact autistic? We can't take away the addiction before we look at the suffering, because they intertwine. It's not necessarily that there isn't an addiction without, like, if you took away the suffering, that there wouldn't still be an addiction, because of course there is some physical component to this, and I'm not an expert in substance abuse addictions. But I don't see how it's possible to take away the addiction, or to cope with that addiction, without also addressing that suffering. So I don't understand the tendency to, like, want to put people either there or there. Like, that's not how it works. That's like saying, okay, no, you know what? I can compare it to this. So this is something that's so common that it's okay for me to talk about. But I've seen clients that they have an autism diagnosis, but their primary problem is actually depression or anxiety. And then what you're met with from psychiatry and from the public system is like, no, but they're autistic, so the problems are because of the autism. And I'm like, no. The autism isn't the problem. The autism is just who they are. It's the depression and the anxiety that is messing up their lives. And we have to treat that as an issue. We have to address those challenges, because otherwise, how is this person going to have a healthy life for them? Autistic well-being. And of course, we can't go into treating depression or anxiety without acknowledging the autism, because the approach has to be different. Autistic people don't respond to traditional treatment in the same way that non-autistic people do. So you have to change the way you're going about it. But we're not trying to fix the autism. We're trying to fix the depression and the anxiety. So yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, definitely look at the anxiety, treat the anxiety, and find out where that anxiety comes from. Some people agree with me. Some people think I'm naive. I think they don't say it to my face, but I think honestly it's an issue with, things have worked this way in psychiatry for so long, and things have worked this way in the funding of psychiatry for so long, that they don't know how to change. So I think increasingly people are seeing this issue, and hopefully we'll get somewhere sometime. I hope, I want us to get better at treating the things that need to be treated, and helping with strategies where that's needed. I want to see that happen. Do you also know an overlap of ASD and borderline? This is a really, really interesting question. This is such an interesting question. Okay, I'm not an expert on personality disorders. I have to say that up front, because it is such a complicated area. However, what I do see is that autistic people who are traumatized, like complex PTSD, they can develop personality disorder like symptoms. And sometimes they are, in fact, diagnosed with personality disorders, sometimes instead of autism. I have heard of some cases where autism and the personality disorder have been diagnosed, have been, valid diagnoses at the same time. But when we see it clinically, very often it's not. So personality disorders are a response, as I understand it, are a response to like what you've been going through and not being able to adapt to the small traumas that are happening to you as you grow up and as you become an adult, and as you go through adult life. So personality disorder isn't something you're born with. You develop that. Is the general agreement. And so specifically with borderline, I see out in the world that especially women and girls are diagnosed with borderline, but in fact, it is complex PTSD on top of autism. And so they come across as personality disordered, but they're not. Once you actually address the trauma that they've been through, the personality disorder falls away, which is a really interesting thing that happened. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes years because treating trauma is difficult. But yeah, that's what I kind of see out in the world and what my colleagues tell me about. Oh, what's the difference between complex PTSD and PTSD? Very good question. One sec. So it is kind of simple and kind of not. And again, this is not my primary field, so. Oh, what are we drinking? This is cranberry cordial, and it is unsweetened, so it's very sour, but it's very, very nice in this heat wave that we're having. I'm boiling in my office right now, and this is really fresh. Okay, so very quickly and simplified, the difference between complex PTSD and PTSD. So PTSD is a diagnosis given when the trauma is a single trigger event. So PTSD is if you have been to war, if you have been in a car accident and you develop PTSD after that, if you have been assaulted and you develop PTSD, like if we can trace it back to a single trigger event, that's PTSD. Complex PTSD is when the trauma has developed like slowly over time. So it's small triggers. And this can be things like being bullied over, months or years, or it can be growing up with an abusive parent. So even if it's not like physical abuse, even if it's and sometimes especially if it's emotional and psychological abuse, um, that will very often develop into complex PTSD. And the results and the symptoms are kind of similar, in that things that remind you of that event are going to trigger you. But with PTSD, because it's very often, well, because it's related to a single event, the things that are going to trigger those flashbacks and that anxiety, um, are going to be things that are directly related to that event. So if you've been to war, it can be things like fireworks, right? The noise of fireworks will make you think of gunfire, and then you're going to have a flashback, anxiety, and all of that. That's kind of the traditional comparison. With complex PTSD, it can be all sorts of things that trigger you. So if you have grown up with, say, a narcissistic mother, things she used to do in her relationship with you, if you are then with a partner or with a friend and they say something similar, all of a sudden you react. And it's going to come off as you being dramatic and, oh, come on, that was nothing. Why are you crying all of a sudden? That's so weird. Like it was nothing. I said this thing and it's such a tiny, tiny thing. Why? Um, but to the person who has complex PTSD, it's a trigger. It's a trauma trigger, and it's not something they control. And so the way it comes off to the outside world is that that's a weird thing to be set off by, but it isn't. So another example, and this is something I've seen several times, not with clients, but actually with friends. They've been in relationships where, for example, a partner has been cheating on them and been gaslighting them about it. So like, no, what are you talking about? That's not what's going on. You don't have to look at my phone. Why would you want to look at my phone? That's super cringy and invasive, and like, respect my privacy and all of these things. But they are actually cheating, right? And so that person, when they're in a new relationship and the new partner maybe doesn't text them as often or doesn't come home right when they say, or maybe they keep their phone, like maybe they turn the screen of their phone so that the other person can't see. That person who has developed complex PTSD from that prior relationship, they will react like, oh, I'm being cheated on again. And they can have very, very emotional reactions to that. And yeah, it is actually a trauma reaction, and you can treat it with trauma therapy. By the way, if you are looking into trauma therapy, EMDR is well validated, and what's it called? Somatic experiencing, SE therapy. Those are the two that are the most well-founded right now. Does your practice focus on autistic parents, or is it more broad? Anything to do with autism and ADD, ADHD, those are kind of the primary groups. And then what happens, of course, is that it's everything related to that. So lots of depression, anxiety, stress, like burnout stress, eating disorders. Yeah, basically, I see a lot of different people with a lot of different challenges, and sometimes it's siblings of autistic people as well, because there can be, like, when you're growing up with a sibling who has a diagnosis, sometimes they're getting all the attention, And it's for a good reason, but it still hurts. So there's still some things that can develop in that relationship. And so we still want to address that. So it's basically, yeah, everything. I will say that I'm primarily focused on cases where the autistic person or the person with an attention disorder, they are within like the normal to high range in cognitive abilities. So if there is a cognitive disability, that's not my primary field. It's not something I don't want to work with, but it's something that I definitely don't have as much experience with. So I'm not as comfortable talking about that. What's my opinion about medication versus therapy for neurodivergent people? Um, well, that depends on the medication and the person. I don't think that people should be medicated just because they're neurodivergent. I think they should be medicated if it helps them. So, like I talked about before, if you have ADD or ADHD, medication can be very helpful. Even if you have all the strategies, even if you're very good at coping with your life, medication can still be helpful. And if it is helpful to you and you want the medication, then I'm all for it. If you have a clinical depression or clinical anxiety that is difficult to treat with just therapy, sometimes medication can help. I would never, ever recommend for medication to stand on its own because medication by itself does very little. So in the case of ADD or ADHD, medication is like, it's a helping tool in your daily life, and that's fine. It's still smart to have the strategies. It's still smart to build that. So I would still recommend not necessarily therapy, but searching for strategies, searching for advice, maybe online. There are a lot of really good educators online. Finding those strategies that work for you to make your life easier, because medication doesn't have to be the only thing. And very often it doesn't do enough. In a case of depression or anxiety, which is what I see most often, medication doesn't cure it. It doesn't. It's symptom treatment. And in order to actually get to the bottom of the depression or the anxiety, that's therapy that's needed. And coping with whatever brought that situation to happen. Like you have to deal with the reason you have a depression. You have to deal with the reason you have anxiety. And not all anxiety can be cured. Sometimes it's about, getting to a point where you can live with it and you're okay with it. For some people, medication is a part of that, and that's fine. But again, it has to be the person's choice. I think where I'm most against it is when I do see some parents that kind of push for medication for their child. And sometimes I agree that medication would be helpful for that child. And sometimes it's like, you just want your daily life to be easier. You're not thinking about what's actually going to happen to that child's brain as it's developing. And it's being given medication on a daily basis. I haven't done the research. I haven't read all the research, and I'm wary of saying that psychiatry is wrong, but I'm cautious when it comes to children and medication. Adults, you can make your own choice about what you want to try, and if it helps you, then it helps you, and that's great. I would definitely recommend to combine medication with something, because medication very rarely solves the problem. But for children, I'm much more wary of medication as even a tool. Sometimes it's necessary, and sometimes it's too much. Yeah. So there's some more people here now. Welcome. We've been here for a bit over an hour. We'll see how long we go. It's late here, obviously. It's past 10 p.m. now. So we'll see when I crash. But for now, we'll keep going. So to those who are new here, my new book, obviously, is What Your Autistic Child Wants You to Know, and it's available in all online bookstores. So wherever you find your books online, you can find my book. And I can't speak to physical bookstores. It's meant for parents, but I've heard feedback from autistic people and from professionals that they find it helpful too. This is a republication with new chapters and a good overhaul. So I do have just a couple of years of feedback from the original, and I think this new version is better, and it does contain definitely some new information, and some really cool people have been involved in the editing and the new chapters. So I do hope you check it out. If you are in the UK, it might be relevant for you to actually go and find the book on jkp.co.uk, Jessica Kingsley Publishing. Their bookshop, you can use a discount code, which is MAJA20, MAJA20. And obviously, if you are in other countries, even in Europe, due to Brexit, that 20% discount might not offset shipping and import fees. So, yeah, do be aware of that. Is it common to offer therapy? I've never been offered, no matter what reason I've been looking for help. Well, I think it depends where you go. So, it probably also really depends on the country. I think in Denmark, there's a relatively larger amount of people that are referred to therapy, or that get approved public funding for like 10 sessions or 14 sessions of therapy. And otherwise people seek it out privately. And obviously that's very expensive. Psychiatrists in Denmark, they're doctors. They don't do therapy, they do medication. And so whenever you're looking for therapy, you want a psychologist or a psychotherapist. Honestly, though, I'm going to be honest here for a second, you guys. I'm going to be really, really blunt and really honest. Just because you have the title doesn't make you a good psychologist. It doesn't make you a good therapist. It doesn't matter what education you have. You might still be really, really bad at helping people. So if I were looking for a therapist, I would be looking for someone that I was a good match with. So someone where we had good chemistry and we spoke well together. I would not be looking for someone with a specific title. So don't go to someone because they have a fancy title or because they're expensive. It doesn't mean they're good. Go to them based on what you feel is right for you and your chemistry with that person, and like look for reviews. look for other people's experience with that person. Um, Obviously, when you do read reviews of mental health professionals, there is one thing to keep in mind, and that is that people who have a good experience generally don't write reviews, um, which is um, it puts you in a kind of bad position because reviews are very often going to be the negative ones because they're going to be the ones that had a bad experience that are going to go online and write something. And as a mental health professional, you don't want to be asking people to write a review because that's deeply unprofessional and unethical. So, um, so there is that to be mindful of. But like, if you have a friend or a family member who went to someone and they had a good experience, that might be a good place to start. Um, so yeah. Um, yeah. Oh, positive reviews are definitely even more valuable. If they're there, or like, very often it's word of mouth, you know, very often it is people talking about, I've been to this person, they're good. um so yeah, I would look for that. Improvement rates between medication and therapy, it's tricky, honestly. Okay, so the research is done in different ways. So with medication, what they look at is it better than a placebo or is it better than a previous drug? Those are the comparisons. Um, with therapeutic interventions, cognitive therapy, narrative therapy, positive psychology, whatever they're called, you know, all of these different approaches, psychodynamic, um, all of the different approaches to therapy, when we do research on those, it's not really possible to compare it to a placebo. So you either compare it to nothing or you compare it to other treatments that are out there. But in order to do that, you have to standardize the treatment so much that it becomes impersonal. And what actually happens is that you're putting people through in research a treatment protocol that is nothing like what they would actually meet in real life. Um, so very often in research, you will find that cognitive therapy has really good numbers in terms of it working well. But that's because cognitive therapy is so easy compared to other types of therapies to put in that framework of being very structured and very much the same. Um, and yeah, it means that the numbers on what therapy works and how well it works are really tricky to actually um, validate, honestly. I mean, research will always say that they validate things really well, but for me, you can't make a set treatment protocol that is therapy, like conversational therapy, and have it work, because by its nature, um, you know, conversational therapy has to be personalized. It has to be customized always, all the time. Every second of therapy is unique, so you can't standardize it. Hi, I am trying to know if I'm autistic, but there's no psychologist here, and I have a lot of symptoms. So how can I be sure? Um, so there are online tests that you can take. Um, Basically, just Google for them. But some of them are really crap. Um, what I would recommend more would be to read things written by autistic people, like autobiographies, see if you relate. Check out videos. It can be YouTube, but it could also be TikTok or whatever. Read things that autistic people are writing. See if you relate. And if you relate, you're probably autistic. And if you relate to the things they say, you can probably use their advice too. Try it out. See what works for you. See it as a process of exploration. Figure out what works for you. And if you really, really want an official diagnosis, then there will be ways in your country to do that. But for a lot of people, an official diagnosis isn't necessary. What's necessary is that they figure out what their needs are and figure out a way to live their lives according to their own support needs, and just figure out a way to have autistic well-being in their lives and not live up to the norm. So I see that someone posted the RADS-R test. It's a possibility. There's also online versions of the AQ test. They're fine. They're fine. I find them a little bit outdated, and I find them sometimes very frustrating to work with because of the language that's used. It can be difficult to understand what the questions actually mean because of the way they're phrased. And so just keep that in mind. But they're fine. They're decent tests, and they are what is used in diagnosis. So yeah, you would meet those. Do you have any advice for autistic people going through high school and university, specifically on managing energy and prioritizing between interests, social life, and schooling? Ouch. That's what the next book is about. I am actually finishing up a book about energy accounting, which I hope is going to be out spring, summer next year. We'll see. It depends very much on the production schedule. But I am finishing that up. So the first thing about going to school when you are autistic is recognizing what is it about school that drains your energy. So when you're going to school, what parts of it, what classes, what teachers, what assignments? Is it the breaks? Is it the transportation? What parts of it drains your energy? And where can you get breaks that are real breaks for you to recharge a little or to not get drained for a moment? And then focus your free time on recharging yourself. Basically, school, like I talked about this at the very, very beginning. It's like a marathon. You're running a marathon, and somehow you have to conserve your energy throughout the entire marathon and get to the finish line and get to the point where you can take a break. Sometimes that's summer vacation. Sometimes it's the end of the education. For me, whenever I had any vacation time, something would happen that would make it not vacation. Like something social, something family related, something would just always happen. And so I never really had a break. And so it would be those small times throughout the day that I could recharge some energy. Be very, very mindful of getting enough sleep, eating right, getting as much exercise as you feel okay with, but definitely get outside. Um, take care of your physical health, because if you don't take care of your physical health, your body and your nervous system are going to be so much more vulnerable to stress, and that leads to burnout. And sometimes it leads to physical illness too, like serious long-term physical illness. So be really mindful of taking care of your physical health as well as your mental health. And that's probably the short version that I can give you. Otherwise, we would be here for like 2 days. But yeah, that's the quick version, and I hope that can help you a little bit. Break things down, figure out where your energy is going, figure out what gives you energy back, get your breaks in, take care of your physical health as well as your mental health. Boom. That was kind of obnoxious of me. I sound like I know everything. I don't. This is my best advice for now, and I hope that it's useful. That's as well as I can do. Yes, there are some really good autistic people on Instagram, and on TikTok and on Twitter and on Facebook. They're everywhere. And honestly, I could never do what they do. They are so good at what they do. They're so good at presenting the information and making it palatable and easily digestible. It's really amazing. So keep a lookout for those people. My meaning about Aspie quiz, I think I already kind of talked about this. The tests out there are fine. A lot of them are based on very old research, and they are kind of outdated, but it's okay. It's okay. Generally speaking, it's fine. All right. Well, do we have any more questions that we should go through right now, or does anyone have anything that they want to talk about? Because otherwise I'm just going to do another spiel about my book. Go read it, and when you've read it, please write some reviews. I hope it's good. See, I never know if people are getting shy when I ask if somebody has questions. Like, I could imagine myself sitting there and just being like, what if it's me? Like, if I write a question, or what if a bunch of questions, like, all at once? Okay, so what is the book about? It is a kind of really short version of presenting knowledge about autism. So basically, when I started in autism education, a lot of parents would tell me, we don't have the time to read all of these books. They're too long. The chapters are too long. So everything I would recommend, they really couldn't, it was too overwhelming for them. So when I wrote this book, I figured if I can take the knowledge that I have and present it in the shortest possible form, but it's still having like some real information there and some real advice. So basically, it is a lot of small topics related to like growing up as an autistic child or teenager, or even things that are relevant as an adult, and seeing like how short can I make it. So I basically tried to make every chapter as short as possible. So some chapters or some bits are like 1 page, some are 5 pages. I think some are a little bit longer than that, but it's like a bit about sensory sensitivities, a bit about the diagnostic criteria, a bit about going on vacation, a bit about my room, a bit about friends, just everything that I could think of to put in there. There's a new chapter about gender identity and sexuality as well. Just all of these topics, but short. And I meant for it to be for parents, but the first release that I self-published, I also got some really good feedback from autistic people and from professionals. So really, it's for everyone. Just jumped in, but is there a link to the book? Well, there isn't one link to the book, but basically anywhere online that you find your books, you can find it. It's called What Your Autistic Child Wants You to Know. And yeah, so anywhere, everywhere. I will probably post a couple of links on Facebook. Yeah, I can do that. But I don't want to spam people either with links. So yeah, I hope that's sufficient to find it. And again, if you're in the UK, you might want to find the book on the JKP website, Jessica Kingsley Publishing's website. And on there, you can use a discount code MAJA20, MAJA20. And that'll give you 20% off. And obviously, due to Brexit, if you're in a different country than the UK, those 20% aren't going to make enough of a difference to offset the import fees and such. Have you thought about making a quiz? No, but actually, one of the people I work with, Kirsten Callison, she is making a new version of a diagnostic tool, which doesn't just give you a number. It actually, right now, it divides into 9 parts of a profile. And I find it so useful because it divides into like social communication, social imagination, or I can never remember the translation of this word. Right now, it's only in Danish. It divides into social sensitivity, sensory sensitivity, and like systemizing and all of these things. It's a really, really good test. And I'm expecting that will be translated into English when they are finished with validating it. And they are in the process of doing that. And I find that quiz more helpful because it doesn't just tell you, are you autistic or not? It tells you more about your profile. What are the things that are difficult for you? And it's not the right term. Sorry, it's because English is my second language and I work so much in Danish. So sometimes I can't get, like, words get jumbled, right? So what I'm thinking about is like your ability to imagine what another person is thinking or why they're doing what they're doing. So basically theory of mind. Yeah. But then again, there's also the double empathy problem, which I think is really helpful. It doesn't matter. Forestillingsevne. Yeah. The double empathy problem, though, I find really interesting because it's saying that it's not autistic people that have difficulties with reading and understanding non-autistic people. It's kind of a both ways problem. And that's not a part of the diagnostic criteria. And it's not, to my knowledge, they don't even consider it in the diagnostic criteria. Um, and so I think there's a flaw there somewhere. But, uh, I have criticisms of a lot of things that, yeah. What are some autism traits you think are really overlooked? Hmm. Um, I think we need to talk more about masking in boys because since uh, either the 2000s or the 2010s, we've been talking a lot more about masking, which is basically pretending as well as you can to be normal, um, which is something that I do a lot as well. And I grew up doing it, and I can't really drop the mask sometimes. But we talk about it as a thing that girls do. We talk about masking as a girl profile thing, and I don't think it is. And I think we're missing a lot of boys who then don't get the diagnosis because they are masking, and we don't expect boys to mask. And I think that's just stupid, and it's sexist of us to expect only girls to be doing this thing that is a really smart survival strategy in childhood. Of course, boys do it too. Of course they do, and we're missing them right now. So, they're not getting their diagnosis. Um, Maybe they're getting their diagnosis in their teens or in their 20s. Maybe they're getting it in their 40s. We don't know. But right now, I just think there are a lot of boys that aren't being seen because of this. So that's something I think is being missed and overlooked. Did I get a sunburn? No, I'm just overheating. It's so warm here. It's literally, and I can't turn on my fan because if I turn on my fan or I open the window, that's going to interfere with the sound like a lot. So I can't. So I'm just sat here melting. Da, 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 da. Ali Sherlock, I'm not very well versed with OCD. I'm really sorry, but I don't think I should be giving you advice without knowing you better. So I think you should talk to someone who can get to know your symptoms and your specific struggles better. Because and they need to know about OCD definitely, in order to help you. So I'm really sorry I can't. Thank you again for everyone saying that my YouTube videos or any of my work has helped them. I'm so grateful to hear that. I'm so grateful to be able to help. Difference between autism and avoidance personality disorders. Again, I'm not an expert in personality disorders. I think there will be some overlap, but autism is definitely its own thing. It's very well described at this point, and while I do think we're missing a lot of things about how we describe it, it is fairly well described, and there is a distinct set of symptoms. I think avoidance personality is a lot more socially focused. It seems to me that it's also very anxiety related, which of course autism is too. But I think there's other things that will be at the foundation of the personality disorder. seeing as autism is so genetically based or triggered. Yeah. What are the connections between autism, gender, and sexuality? I know that there are more autistic people who are queer, but what are the possible explanations for the overlap? See, that research has not been done to my knowledge. We just don't know. And the thing is, it's really tricky to even do that research, in part because of how easily the research can be misunderstood to be, anti-queer or anti-LGBTQIA. It's there's a cultural thing happening right now that makes it difficult to seek knowledge about this area, this field. But where I also understand why people are reacting the way they're reacting. So it's tricky. We don't know. What we do see is that when we screen for autism amongst queer youth, we find a lot of people who are undiagnosed. And so there is a much higher proportion of autistic people who are queer, non-binary, trans, and who have other sexualities than straight. I could speculate, but I just don't know. My overall speculation is that we don't understand the boxes that society is trying to put us into, and we reject them. But on the other hand, I see a lot of other autistic people who prefer those boxes and want to stay very firmly within those boxes because they understand the rules then. So it's both, I guess. It's still the same thing with, like, we fall into extremes. And yeah. Do you get tired easy? Yes, I do. And that's one of the reasons why I only work part-time, is because I get drained, I get tired, and my own well-being suffers when I try to do too much. So I'm the type of person who will keep working until I literally can't. And by then, I will have not taken care of my own physical or mental health for a while. And that ends badly. So I have to pace myself. Please have lots of children. That's not going to happen. I'm almost 36 now. So if I have any, it'll be one. Maybe. We'll see. A long time ago, I would have said it's never going to happen. I don't know. I feel like there's a point at which I would personally feel like I was too old. And yeah, I'm turning 36 in a couple of months. I'm 35 right now. Yeah. A lot of people tell me I don't look my age, but it's yeah. I'm old. Have you considered re-uploading some of the older videos? I mentioned this briefly earlier. I have just gone through some of them, and the ones that I know I would like to have public again, I have added just a little note to the description to say this video is from before I was a psychologist. Please keep that in mind when watching. And I hope that that's going to be sufficient to be a reminder to people that this channel has existed for so many years before I got this education and this title. So a couple of them are back online. Do we fall into both extremes at the same time? Yeah, yeah. We definitely do. And I find that we do that with almost everything, really. So any symptom of autism that you can have, or any personality trait or any belief that you can have, I find that autistic people tend more towards the extremes than other groups do. Maybe that's confirmation bias. Maybe I'm observing it because I already think that. I don't know. But that is something that I do think. Have you heard of autism-related catatonia? Well, yes and no. Catatonia is, to my knowledge, a trauma response or a stress response. And I have seen clients who have previously been social, they've been speaking, they've had something close to a non-autistic looking life, and something brought them to that point of losing facial mimicry, not necessarily losing their ability to speak, but certainly restricting their speech quite a lot. Some people entirely lose their ability to speak. There's a change in how they move. There's a huge change in how they interact with the world. It's not something that I know a lot about, but it's definitely something that happens. And I think we probably need more research to figure out why. And the tricky part is that research probably needs to be qualitative, because we need those people's experiences of what happened and what brought them to that state. So it's tricky. Thank you. Are weird sleep cycles a thing for autistic people? Or no, it's a thing. It's definitely a thing. I don't think I've met a single autistic person that didn't have some kind of issue with sleep. It can be falling asleep. It can be staying asleep. It could be having a steady sleep rhythm. Like their circadian rhythm is just all over the place. There can be issues with quality of sleep. So they do sleep, but it's not good sleep, and they end up like just being constantly fatigued. Like they don't get to phase 3 and 4. A lot of people with ADD, ADHD have that same issue. And yes, melatonin works for some people. It does not work for everyone, which I find really interesting. But I think it just depends on what your issue with sleep is and how well you respond to melatonin. Melatonin is it a neurotransmitter or a hormone? I don't remember, but it's what our brain produces. It's what our nervous system produces to make us fall asleep. And so when we take melatonin in pill form, it's not a traditional sleeping pill. It's kind of a natural remedy. And it works for a lot of people, but it does not work for everyone. So try it out. It's a hormone. Thank you. I can never remember. There are so many. Do you and your colleagues follow and discuss? Oh, no. No, I don't want to talk about that person. I have opinions. They should not be here. Do you find this tendency to extremes within sexuality too? So a tendency towards asexuality or hypersexuality? Yes. I do. And I also, the thing is, combined with the social challenges of autism, there are some things that become difficult. So communication about what your preferences are, what your needs are, and how to express them appropriately to other people and in what contexts. It's tricky, you know? I actually, one thing that, I'm not going to say who this is, but this is someone that I know personally. It's actually several people that I know personally, where following the increasing public interest in specific sexual pursuits, BDSM. I had chats with a couple of my friends who are autistic who told me that they actually enjoy the BDSM culture, not necessarily because of kinks, but just because of the rules. Like knowing how to communicate about what is going to happen, what you like, what you don't like, when to stop, all of these things, like all of the rules and the scripts that are there in that way of doing things, is what attracted them to that lifestyle. So I find that really interesting that there's this whole like kink culture, and there might actually be a lot of autistic people in there who maybe some of them do have interests in those kinks, but some of them are there because there are rules and they know how to act. And I find that just so cool. Like if that's something that works for you, do it, you know? So yeah, and definitely there are more of us that are asexual as well. And yeah, I see generally that we seem to fall into extremes. And again, maybe I'm biased. I don't know. There's a lot of comments about melatonin now. Yeah, it works for some people sometimes, and yep. I have a friend that goes from hyper to asexuality from day to day. I don't know if it also has something to do with her BPD. It might. It might be a mood thing. It might be a hormonal shift. Some people just are different from day to day. And it's just a part of being human. You know, we're all different. Are there any biological markers for autism? And if so, are there any tests? We do know that it is highly hereditary and highly genetic. So there is a very large genetic component to autism. And there have been many gene mutations associated with autism. And we're talking like 200-300 different mutations associated with autism. And the thing is, because there are so many, we can't find one. We can't find one that is relevant in all cases because there isn't one. Autism, genetically speaking, is very versatile. But there's definitely a genetic component. And I don't remember the exact statistics, but when we look when we look at twin studies, the interesting thing that we see is that the genetic component isn't 100%. So even if we look at twins who share an egg, I can't remember the word for that right now. I'm sorry. Um, in Danish, it's eneggede tvillinger. So if we look at them, it's like 70%. So in 70% of cases, both of them will develop autism, but not 100. There is also identical twins. Thank you. There also seems to be a component that is the in utero environment. So basically, the different levels of hormones that the fetuses are subjected to or exposed to would be the more correct term. Sorry. In the uterus. But again, this doesn't explain everything. And so what we're left with is like, we know that there's a huge genetic component, but we don't know really anything. So we don't know what autism is. We don't know how to explain it. Maybe there are epigenetic triggers. So things that happen after you're born can affect the way your genes are expressed. And so it's possible that you can be predisposed to autism and that it's then triggered after you're born. But honestly, just saying that is like a big no-no. You're not supposed to say that, but because it's the general knowledge is that it's genetic. And as I said, identical twin studies, it seems to be about 70-ish%. Again, I can't remember the exact number, but what's the rest? There's some in utero environment, there's some we don't know. So what is that? And how do we explain it? We just don't know. If I wanted to date women like you, where should I look first? Find yourself a nerd. Nerds are the best. So the way, honestly, okay, so nobody should ask me for dating advice, but I'm going to try anyway. All of the relationships that I've seen in my social circle that have been successful, it doesn't mean that they've necessarily lasted, for 10 or 20 years, but they've been good, healthy relationships. And the split hasn't been traumatic, or like, if I look at what are like the things that are comparable in those relationships, they are interest-based. Like, they are people who are interested in at least some of the same things, not necessarily in the same way or to the same degree, but they have some shared interest. And they are people who are willing to talk about their needs and to admit faults and to compromise. So communicating and growing as a person, they're people who are willing to do that. It doesn't mean they start out as like super adults whatever, I don't even know what to call it, but like they're willing to. Um, and very often there was some form of a friendship there first. Not necessarily years and years, but there was some form of a friendship. They at least knew each other for some person, like for some amount of time beforehand. Um, so those are the best relationships that I see. But definitely talk to others about the person you're dating and about your relationship. Share your experiences and be willing to hear if someone tells you that doesn't sound right. Because the way we figure out when we're in an unhealthy relationship is also through communication. So if someone is treating you badly, you're gonna very likely hear it from your friends who you're sharing with about your relationship with, and they say, "Are you okay with that? Is that okay? It doesn't sound right to me." Because if, like, when we're in unhealthy relationships, when people are in unhealthy relationships, they very often are not the first to notice. It takes such a long time to notice. So talk to people. Talk to people. And I know that this goes against our instinct as autistic people sometimes. We're not necessarily the most communicative people. But because we're not overly talkative, the things we do need to share with others and the things we tend to think about over and over again tends to be the kind of stuff we need to talk to others about. And it's a very good thing to do. And if you have a hard time talking verbally to other people, write it down. Have a friend that you chat with instead of speaking face to face. Chatting is fine. Whether it's text or voice chatting, or if it's, email, whatever. But find some way to communicate with somebody about what you're going through. And yes, dating websites suck. I can't get to everything because we do have to wrap up soon. My biggest flaw is my humility. People you should stay away from. Yes. To some extent, people who point things like that out, if they are joking, great. It can be funny. But if they're serious about that, then it's very likely that they don't know themselves very well. Yeah. With autistic women, isn't it like there are 20 males for every one woman who thinks like-minded? I can't tell you what the stats are on people who think in a similar way. I can tell you that when we look at prevalence studies for autism, we generally hear, the latest study from the CDC, and they only look at 8-year-olds, but the latest study from the CDC say 1 in 54, I think, or is it 1 in 45? I cannot remember. I'm sorry. It's a very, very low number, or it's a very high number, actually. But they also say 4 males per female. But when we look at prevalence studies in adults, we actually see that it's more like 2 men per woman, or per woman. So first of all, that tells me that the CDC study is probably underestimating how many autistic people are actually out there. But I don't know why they choose 8-year-olds. It's just a decision that they've taken, and they always look at 8-year-olds. So every new prevalence study that they do, it's going to be it's going to be 8-year-olds for that year. So yeah, but yes, it seems to be that there are, and of course this is a very binary gender description, so I don't have numbers on non-binary people in this segment. So all I can say is the prevalence studies say that possibly there are only about 2 men per woman with autism, with an autism diagnosis. Yeah. Or who qualify for one. So it's it used to be a very male diagnosis. And the diagnostic criteria, honestly, are based on young white boys. So the diagnostic criteria really do not take into account how versatile the autistic community actually is. The diagnostic criteria don't take into account like anything about other types of profiles. It's based on that classic profile. I do think that the new DSM-5 criteria are a little bit better. They do include sensory sensitivities, which is great. And the text that goes with it kind of admits that, you know, autistic people can learn strategies and can become like better at masking, or they can mask, and that very often autism symptoms won't show until kind of the demands of everyday life exceed your capacity. So basically when social things become too difficult, or when you become too stressed, or if you develop a depression, that's when your autism is going to show. So I think that the DSM criteria is a little bit better, but basically it's, yeah. How do you think the main difference in how autism is manifested in women compared to men? There's a section in the book about that. So yeah. So, you know what, guys? It is 11 p.m. here now, and my voice is getting tired. You can probably hear that. And so I think this might be a good time to wrap this up. I do hope that you all want to check out my book. And if you like it, then thank you. I'm grateful. Anywhere that you find books online, so on Amazon or on wherever you find books online, you'll find it. And again, it's called What Your Autistic Child Wants You to Know. And yeah, please do check it out and write a review somewhere. It was really awesome to talk to you guys. And yeah, I hope I can do this again sometime soon. It's been a lot of fun to talk to you guys. Thank you. And thank you for hanging out with me. Bye. Or, hey, as I used to close my videos, keep swimming.